Welcome to the Wealth Matters podcast, where investors come together to better understand how to build passive cash flow and create generational wealth without all the confusing mumbo-jumbo. Here's your host and co-author of Amazon #1 bestseller, Alpesh Pamar.
Welcome to Wealth Matters Podcast. I am going to talk to Sief Khafagi today. He's an ex-techie like me, turned real estate investor who has helped thousands diversify into real estate after spending nearly 5 years at Facebook, where he built the second largest engineering organizations across the world. So that's awesome. And by the way, perfect timing. Facebook just announced, mass layoff, right?
Unfortunately, I heard the news, Alpesh. Unfortunately, I'm sure a lot of colleagues were impacted, and
Yes,
I'm wishing them the best.
Yeah, no, me too. But, we knew this was coming. The way real estate, stock market, cryptos, everything grew in last couple of years just because of law, because it had to do a lot with the free money printing as well. I knew the ball has to stop at some point, and that's why it's always good to diversify and get into this game. So, welcome, Sief.
Thanks. Nice to meet you, and really happy to be here.
Absolutely, man. So, tell us something interesting or funny about yourself.
Something that I think, at least I'll go with the funny route. So, all throughout when I was younger, I actually hated traveling. And the reason for it is my parents immigrated from Egypt to the States back in like the late 80s, early 90s.
Wow,
and
okay.
had me and my sister here. And when we throughout our first probably 12, 13 years of life, every summer we would go to Egypt. And it wasn't like a week though. It was like 3 months, right? It was like
You
your
have to.
whole summer.
You have to, because it's so far, right? So when we
It's so
visit
far.
India, of course, we go at least 4 weeks. That's minimum, right? Because otherwise.
And I didn't know that, right? And when I didn't understand that as a younger person, so I hated travel. I hated going anywhere. Felt like I had to like make new friends every single summer, right? Because I was just like, oh my goodness.
Right.
And here I am in the hospitality space with short-term rentals, right? Just investing in the asset class that I firmly believe in.
And you want everyone to travel.
And I want everyone to travel. So that's a little funny tidbit right there.
Wow, that's interesting. So how did you start? Facebook, amazing, building the second largest engineering organization in the world. How did you start investing in real estate, and why?
Yeah, I was privileged enough while I was at Facebook. I was a single workaholic who happened to work in high tech and, living with like 3 other dudes in a house and living the tech life, which was high compensation, low expenses.
Exactly. That's what they say. Yeah.
Right?
You can live wherever you want.
Totally. And, I found myself in a privileged position where I started to look into investing in real estate, and predominantly it was a way for me to lower taxes at the time.
Right.
And that's how I started getting into things like single family homes, short-term rentals. I became an LP in several other syndication types, right? Things like multifamily and storage and mobile home parks. But I found a lot of love in the world of short-term rentals because it allowed the creativity side of myself come out with also the professional underwriting, finance, real estate side of myself. And then I met Sabrina while we were both up in the Bay, and we, kept in touch over the years. And fun fact, we saw each other again. And we were like, "What are you doing?" And we're like, "We're both interested in short-term rentals." And she had a couple, and I had a couple, and we were like, "Why don't we scale this?" And so we built some software. I know, right? The techie who built software, not real estate.
We can't live without it.
Yeah, and so when we built the software, everyone loved the software, but no one wanted to use it. But everyone was like, "Here's some money to go do it yourself." And essentially they were talking about a syndication or a fund. And that's generally how things would start to snowball from there.
So tell us more about the software. What exactly is that software? Is that helping you with due diligence? Is it helping with underwriting, or is it helping you with overall management of your short-term rentals?
Yeah, so we have software that really helps us across 3 parts of the stack or 3 parts of the journey. The first part of our software journey starts at acquisition. So we underwrite over 257 markets across the country. We can add any location at any time. We're plugged into the MLS. We have open access there. And as soon as a property hits the market, we know about it within about 15 seconds. We have all the data around it from a short-term rental perspective, and it's already comped, appraised, all those types of things within all the connections of our software, and gives us an idea of whether we should pursue it or not. 94% of the time it sucks. It's a deal that sucks.
Right.
And, if you're as someone who comes from tech, I hate spending my time on things that are just a waste of time.
Yeah.
And so that's why we built it. And then of course, Taylor, John, our head of data and head of acquisition, they spend time on their 6% of properties that actually do make sense and comp it from a human perspective. Secondly, from there, we're able to also plug into operating the portfolio, right? Our own revenue management and our predictions and our data and comping those types of things, right? To help us run a better streamlined portfolio at scale. And lastly is we take all this raw data and then we actually build out our own market models to help us identify what the best types of product is to buy in each location, because each market for short-term rentals is hyper local.
Right, of course.
Right. So each home, each amenity, all those things are very unique to each
real
market.
estate is pretty much local. Sorry to interrupt.
Always.
Right. And then if you are going into a niche like short-term rental, some places people wouldn't want a mansion. Some other places, they will be fine with a one-bedroom condo. Like when I visited Hawaii, I'm like, yeah, this is good enough, right? So yes, you're right.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
So do you prefer platforms like Airbnb or VRBO, or you try to build your own website and platform?
So we do not believe in owning our own channels or our own OTA, at least as of today. The predominant reason is we believe we are good at a lot of things, and that is not one area where we want to go reinvent the wheel.
Right.
We are solving the problem of finding, identifying, and doing this at scale. And there's enough challenge in that journey, right? Where we're totally okay with giving up 2 or 3% to an OTA who's bringing us the client on the other hand, right? And in fact, Airbnb and Vrbo and some of these other channels are, they're good at what they do. There's a reason they're successful. So by plugging into the ecosystem is oftentimes a smarter play.
Right. And do you prefer one over the other?
I mean, Airbnb is where I think 90% of people typically think when they think about Airbnbs and short-term rentals by nature. And we definitely see that when we see the volume. But Vrbo definitely gets your larger homes, a little bit more traffic. But Airbnb is, the king of the ring for sure.
Right. So, and I have interviewed a lot of short-term rental coaches on the platform, on the podcast. One of the coaches had said that he prefers to just be on one platform, Airbnb. The other coach said that she prefers to be on Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com to maximize the potential, right? Is it good to be on multiple platforms, or is it better to just focus on one and, be super host and get, good at it?
Yeah, I think in our opinion, definitely multiple platforms generally is best, especially because a lot of the automation that happens behind the scenes, I don't think it necessarily matters for most hosts where you get all your bookings from. And there's advantages to each, right? Like Vrbo offers certain things, Airbnb offers certain things, and both of them don't have certain things. At the end of the day, like wherever your avatar is where you have to be, right? Like the market dictates where you are, not you dictate where you are.
Right. No, I think that makes sense now that I think of it, because some markets, Vrbo would be better. Some markets, Airbnb would be most of the time better. And then Airbnb caters to more, younger generations, whereas Vrbo, I heard, again, I may be wrong, it would be caters to more older generation or families and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree. Agreed.
And let's talk about underwriting, because that is what I want to focus on this episode of, and of course we can come back and talk about other stuff, but how do you underwrite short-term rentals? What's your process?
So we're looking at a lot of things, right? I think a lot of people think about like ADR and occupancy, right, as like two clear big indicators. We just look at total market revenue, right? And we look at like how supply has been changing, how demand has been supply and changing from there. But we also just look at revenue as an aggregate, right, over those things. We typically perform in the 75th to 95th percentile in any market, and that's really important to us to make sure that we're underwriting towards our performance. So that's one part of it. The other thing is also understanding what comes with owning a home, right? I think a lot of people, what I see at least online, is people are forgetting things like cleaning and OpEx and CapEx and reserves, and all of a sudden they're like, they're trying to make the numbers look really good because they want to be emotionally bought in to buy
Right,
it, right?
right.
When you think about the short-term rental space, 99% of it is mom and pops. It's not
Yeah.
institutionalized yet, right? We're really one of the first to try to go and institutionalize it. And so when you have that, you often get a lot more emotion in the investment decision. And that's oftentimes where a lot of things start to break, right?
Yeah,
Because you're
of
trying to
course.
make the numbers, not necessarily follow the data. And we're using several data sources to help us drive through those things, but we're underwriting it just like you would underwrite any multifamily deal, right? You're looking at your purchase price at value, you're looking at your entry cap, your exit cap, all those types of things. Very, very similar. It's just done on a singular asset level.
Right. And how do you look at the actual revenue model, right?
Yeah.
What do you look at, to figure out the revenue? And do you look at websites like AirDNA and maybe others?
Yeah. So Scott, who founded AirDNA, is one of our advisors as well. And we have several other data sources that we use. But we also build our own models based on data that we find and scrape and identify. But also, as we're in more of these markets, we have better ideas of what our data is because we are a part of the data set, right? And so
Right.
not only are you working with secondary data, because that's really what AirDNA is, and all these other platforms, is to you as a
Right.
user, it's secondary data, right? To them,
Right.
it might
Yep.
be primary data, but it's in many cases hard to verify or non-verifiable, and that's where you're trusting the technology to come through. But with us, naturally, we have 70 plus properties in 10 plus markets. So it's easy for us at times to look at what our other homes are doing in this market, identify the trends, and that's primary data, right? We understand it to a T. We can guarantee that it's accurate because we're getting it firsthand. And so that becomes another advantage.
That makes sense. And what are some of the red flags you have seen during underwriting or you may see?
I think the first thing is like not understanding your base case, your worst case, and your best case. I think a lot of people typically underwrite for what they believe is a best case, but I'm like, really, what's your worst case, right? And are you comfortable with that base case and worst case scenarios? And we're comfortable with a base case of 5, 6, 7%. And if we know we're not going to end up there because of our performance and our track record and our operational ability and the type of product that we design. But like, we never want to be in a position of negative yield, right? Things
Of
become
course.
really, really dangerous in a time of negative yield. And I think people generally, they want to get like 15, 20, 30%, or they won't do the deal. And I'm like, well, if you're going to be looking for those 20, 30% cash on cashes and short-term rentals, I think those days are long gone. And I don't know if they're ever going to come back.
Yep.
So it's really what's a realistic expectation in your market, and each market is different. Are you in a high
Yeah.
appreciating market, a high cash flowing market? It's very difficult to talk about underwriting on a national scale because what you look for and what those red flags are completely different on the hyperlocal side.
Oh, that makes sense. Can you take us through one of the recent underwriting you may have done, and it worked out the way you underwrote? Like, let's say you looked at a property and you said, okay, this is what we think we'll make, and then after 6 months, that property is generating or doing same or better than your underwriting.
Yeah, I'll actually give you one that we think was a really good case study from an underwriting perspective. It was actually an existing short-term rental when we bought it.
Okay.
It was one of the few that we have that was an existing short-term rental, and it was doing about 145, right? So we actually
Gross.
asked gross, and we asked for the data. We went through the data. We did our diligence, and it was verified. It was doing about 145. And so we were like, look, we're comfortable with it if it maintains doing 145. If that's an approach we're comfortable with. And through where we identified is they had a massive CapEx budget, right? Like they were
Ah,
spending like they were spending on every little thing every single month, and their margin was just shot,
I see,
right? For
of
lack of a
course.
better word, right? So they weren't really operating it and maintaining it in a way that was an institutional grade. So with that, we implemented better design. We added a couple renovations. More importantly, we recognized opportunity to add a bunch of amenities that they were missing, right? And pushing our ADRs and revenue up as well as occupancy. That property has now been live for 8 months, and we are on track currently to do about 204 grand, right?
Wow.
So we'll be able to push another $60,000 top line on a property like this, really without much of an investment, right? I mean, any of us here would agree that even if we put in $100,000 into the property and we were able to juice an extra 60 grand in top line, we would do that investment time and time and time again,
Correct.
right? It's a great return on cost. And those are the advantages we look for. We look for like, where is it today? How can we add value following the data? And can we prove this value in an operational model at scale, right? But we're also not competing against other institutions. We are the institution in the space.
Got it. And when you say add value, what kind of value did you add in at this particular short-term rental?
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, the property didn't have a hot tub, right? And in this market, it was important. The design was horrible, right? It was very much like if you're walking into a grandma's old house and you're like, okay, it kind of stinks a little bit. And we added a mural, which in this market is really powerful.
Oh,
It was a
wow. Okay.
$600 expense that actually
That's
makes it a
nothing.
big,
Yeah.
a huge Instagrammable thing. They weren't using dynamic pricing, meaning they were charging the same
Oh,
every
that's
single night,
important. That's very
right?
important.
So
Yeah.
that's huge. We're able to drive some more revenue there. And actually, one of my favorites on a property like this is they're from an operational perspective, they were taking really horrible photos. I think a big part of understanding
Right.
Airbnb and short-term rentals is you have to understand the product. And coming from tech, Airbnb is just a product, right? There's a user
Yeah.
journey. And part of that user journey and what the outcome is, Airbnb wants you to book. And so by understanding their user journey, we feed into it, right? Just like Google, we rank higher.
Yep.
Our photos are there, certain keywords, certain pricing strategies. And again, all these like little hacks is what this previous owner was not doing, where we recognize, we think we can bump revenue up here pretty significantly. We didn't know exactly what the ceiling was, and we actually don't even think we've hit the ceiling necessarily. But we knew we could do better than 145, even though we were comfortable with a 145.
Oh, that's great. Which markets, and you mentioned a lot of the markets, but which markets do you currently focus on and why?
So about 80%, 85% of our properties are going to be across the states of Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Florida.
Okay.
And so those are going to be like in submarkets within those. Other markets we're in include places like Blue Ridge, Georgia, the Hudson Valley of New York,
Right.
Memphis and Branson, Panama City Beach, right in the Panhandle. So about 50% of our portfolio is destination markets like beach,
Right.
mountain
Of course.
towns, and 50% is a little bit more urban city, places like Scottsdale and Clearwater and those types of things. And it's a really great balance, right? And I think that's a big thing that we offer accredited investors that we work with is, with a single check as low as 25 grand, you can get instant diversification across the board, not have to deal with any of the pain that comes with managing your own properties, get all the same tax benefits, right? That's really the problem that we're solving here on the passive side.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, I want to throw you a curveball, and this is what I saw. And I was about to actually buy my own first STR in March of 2020, and somehow I did not pull the trigger. And then for first 6 months, I was happy, and then I realized, oh, I missed the boat. But but let me ask you this: a lot of the investors bought STR in the last couple of years, right? And because of remote work and no bed lifestyle and all that, they were doing good, but things are changing. Right. Somehow, and that's what I'm noticing, this demand seems to be waning now, like Twitter asking people to come back to work, right? A lot of Apple has already asked, and that 3 times a day you got to be in the office, right? I mean, 3 times a week, right? So do you think the STR market will see a bigger collection than single family market? Because we are already seeing that some markets, single family markets, which were hot, like Bay Area, LA, Phoenix to Austin, they are already correcting 5 to 10%, right? Or have corrected. Do you think STR would even correct larger than that? Or what are you seeing in the market now?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things, right? So first and foremost, I think that if anyone was underwriting based on like COVID data exclusively, that was your first mistake, right? That's not what we do. We look at data pre-COVID and post-COVID, not necessarily during COVID, because we all know those peaks and valleys happen and they're cyclical with that, with all that. I also think that a 5 to 10% correction is really not a correction at all. I think it's probably due, given how fast things accelerated, right? And people freak out when it's down 10%. I'm like, well, you were also up 32%, right?
Yeah.
16 months
50% in
ago.
last 2 years, at
Yeah,
least
so
everywhere.
it's everything is cyclical, and those who are forced to sell are the ones who lose, right? And that's why we take on long-term fixed rate debt. But in terms of short-term rental revenue, I mean, I'll speak freely here and just in real time. I mean, every Monday we go through our portfolio and look at last week's revenue and trending data. I mean, I'm looking at our data right now, and we're 19% over for the month of November. We're entering the month of December over 24% for targets, and we're well into the green through Q1 of
Nice.
2023. So, do I believe that revenue can come down in short-term rentals? I mean, of course, but naturally, you have to remember that we're operating in the top decile of performance, predominantly because we're competing against mom and pops who don't have the technology, team, traction, et cetera, that we have. So, in every asset class, there will always be losers. There will also always be winners. And we happen to believe that we have one of the best performing assets in this space because we're led by an incredible team of operators who do this day in and day out. But we aren't seeing any slowdown in revenue as of today. I fully expect it at some point in the future, just like every asset class is cyclical. But we have really conservative underwriting to where we can be and have really great profitability.
That's awesome. I appreciate you providing honest feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's switch gear. Are you ready for fire round?
Let's do it.
Would you be changing any business or investment strategy because of inflation or recession?
I will be owning more real estate and borrowing more debt because in an inflationary world, if you can outpace debt, you will always win.
Right. Favorite real estate or finance or any other related book?
There's a book called Contagious. It's by a fellow named Jonah. I forgot his last name. But I really like it because it's all about building a brand and an experience that's contagious, right? And for us, there's two clients or two types of people we work with. It's investors that we work with as well as guests. And either
Right.
way, we want them to have a contagious experience.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah.
Any tool or website you recommend or you cannot live without, other than Airbnb.com?
I was gonna say techvestor.com. No, I'm kidding. But I think for us, one of the tools that we really love is Price Labs and Rank Breeze. I mean, those are
Yes.
tools that we really love in terms of the space. I mean, it's how you use them at the end of the day. But I think they're really trying to make efforts here and pushing these strategies that'll help most people win.
That's awesome, man. Any advice for beginner investors?
Jump in. My first property I bought at the height of the 08, 2010 time. I lost a bunch of money, hated real estate for a long time, hated travel. And, if I wouldn't have jumped in, I wouldn't have been here today. Jump in, make mistakes, go for it. Whether you're going to be a passive investor or an active investor, I think that's a big question people should ask earlier in their career is, why do you want to be an active investor? And I think that reason has to be super powerful for you to go and do all the work. If not, go be a passive investor. Trust me when I tell you, it's a lot easier to go be a passive investor. So you should really have a motivation and a passion to being active if that's the route you take.
I agree. And even when someone tells you it's semi-passive, you still have to do work when you
Nothing semi-passive. 2
you
feet
still
in.
got to manage the property, manage it. And that's how I started. I still, of course, and now investors invest with us, same as you do, right? We have mobile home parks and senior housing. And I tell people, if you love your job, you don't want to, get out of your job or business, then passive may be the way to go.
Agreed.
How do you give back?
We give back first and foremost, actually, every day through our homes and the experiences we provide. That's actually one big thing that drives our entire team is seeing a product come to life and the experiences that families get staying at our homes. Many of them are purposely built for family vacations, bachelorette or bachelor parties, and these are iconic moments in people's lives. And we get really excited when we get feedback in our reviews and just comments back saying, wow, this is amazing, or my child could not wait to stay here. And those types of things are quite fulfilling. So we like to think that we give back every day.
That's awesome. How can my listeners reach out to you?
You can visit techvestor.com, request a conversation, reach out to any of us on LinkedIn. We're fairly active there. Taylor has a great Twitter if you're on Twitter. He's our head of acquisition. So feel free to reach out and get to know us.
Hey, thank you so much, Sief, for your time, man. I had fun.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alpesh. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Wealth Matters podcast. If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes so others can enjoy the show too. Have a great week and happy investing!